Let's bottom out your MX stem on your hot swap board. Who gives a damn? I need to understand the type of stabs, north-facing mount, or putting keycaps. Double shot can be both ABS and PBT. I need some answers ASAP. Good people, let's be real, understanding everything there is to know about the keyboard space comes in waves. I only recently understood what looped switches means and how they feel, or that keycaps have a use specification to indicate the size. So what I've done is compile an entire keyboard terminology that is often referenced in keyboard reviews and marketing of both entry-level keyboards, gaming keyboards, and beyond, and this way you know what things mean and eliminate any confusion moving forward. So let's start with some really interesting terms related to switches. Hot swap. That's a hot term that gets spread around. That means the switches are removable from the PCB and can usually be swapped for other flavors of switches. This is desirable because you can install your favorite switches into a hot swap keyboard and enjoy some variety in the future as well, or potentially replace a broken switch, etc. We hear the term fast gaming switches or something else that is related to speed. All this means is the actuation point on the switch is high, usually around 1mm, so registration happens faster than the common 2mm actuation point. It started with the Cherry MX Speed switches that had an actuation point of 1.2mm, so you lightly tap the keys and be sort of speedy with your inputs. Of course, understanding the switch specs is pretty simple. We have the total travel distance of the switch, an actuation point where your input is registered, a reset point where the switch is reset and is ready for activation again, a tactile or clicky position that if not at the same as actuation point, it's very close, and the actuation force measured in centinewtons or grams, which is how much force you need to apply to pass the actuation point, and usually these values are associated with light, medium, and heavy switches. Now, one of my most common mistakes when buying a new keyboard is not realizing there's an incoming message from our sponsor. Smooth. Play your games the right way with the much improved Virtuoso RGB Wireless XT with Bluetooth support, fantastic swivel hinges, deeper ear cushions, tactile controls with USB-C charging, a beefy microphone to step up your comms game, and awesome wireless sound reproduction. Check it out below. Alright, so we've got a lot of terminology to learn. Let's go. Key rollover. This is usually presented as N key rollover or NKRO, or a specific number indicated as key rollover. This tells you how many keys can be registered at the same time. So in the early days, we saw 8 or 16 key rollover for fancy gaming keyboards, but now the processor on keyboards is powerful enough to register all the keys at once, so you can literally press all the keys and they will all be registered. So it's quite bizarre seeing keyboards that are brand new to come out with only 6 key rollover. Logitech, come on, what are you doing? Stabs or stabilizers are receiving a lot more attention lately, and that's the metal wire that holds the larger keys in place on each end, so your spacebar, for example, is stabilized regardless of where you press on it. Otherwise, without the stabilizer, the key will be very much a playground. Polling rate is very interesting as we're finally going beyond the 1000 Hz. That's the measurement on how many times a second the keyboard is sending the signal to your computer. So 1000 Hz is measured as 1 millisecond response time, and we now have 8000 Hz keyboards or 0.25 millisecond response time. That is absolutely insane and questionable in terms of its usability. Optical versus mechanical is also a common question. So optical switches are also considered to be mechanical in a sense, but use a laser for the actuation, so it's an instant registration with usually much longer lifespan, while standard mechanical switches use a metal contact and have a slightly lower response time and debounce delay. Now, debounce delay is necessary to remove the unwanted signal from the two metal contacts literally bouncing off each other, unlike with an optical switch where you have this on and off state. With mechanical contacts, that signal is not very clean and needs to be filtered out by the controller on the keyboard. Otherwise, the bouncing effect might introduce additional keystrokes which are not intended. Bottoming out is when the switch is pressed all the way down. Bottoming out also refers to the sound profile of keycaps hitting the top of the switch or the plate. So interestingly, different keycaps, because of their material, produce different bottoming out sound characteristics. Switch stem is the part onto which the keycap gets mounted. So you'll often hear MX style stem, as that is by far the most common throughout Switch's world with Kale, Gatoron, and of course Cherry. But there are different style switches, and the stem part can also be different and require specific type of keycaps. Box style switches are becoming a little bit more popular now that stabilize the stem when you press it down because of the box housing, eliminating the keycap wobble. South or north facing mount. So this refers to the orientation of the LED on the switch. Very common is a north facing mount to allow better illumination of the keycap text, while south facing mounts have better clearance for all types of keycap sets, but at the compromise of less shine through text because the LED is at the bottom, so it acts more of like as a backlight underneath the keycaps and not shining through. Common terms used to describe negative switch feel include wobble, either switch wobble inside the mount or the stem wobble that is more evident with keycaps. Scratchiness refers to the lack of smoothness when you press the switch, usually felt on poor linear switches and can be audible too. Then we have ticking. So this is a less used term, but still something to know about when talking about stabilizers. This is what it sounds like. So this is when one side of the larger keys produces a ticking noise when you lightly tap it, and it's caused by uneven wire of the stabilizer that moves within its mount and is not firmly held in place. Rattle is also common among mainstream keyboards where the stabilizers hit the plastic housing and produce unpleasant sounds that are different from pinging. And pinging is also a common term used to describe resonance inside the keyboard frame that might be hollow, or a switch that is particularly loud because of the spring, and this is solved with either foam inside the keyboard for better sound or lubing your springs. Lubing. So this refers to applying special sort of grease to components inside the switch or the stabs to improve both how they feel and how they sound. You can buy these full lubing stations to help you take apart the switch and streamline the entire process. It is fairly time consuming, but the end result is always worth it as long as you don't overlube. Lubing is also generally done for linear switches or tactile and not on clickies, because that will turn the clicky point into a mushy tactile point. We don't want that. Now, common terms used to describe positive switch characteristics include the thonk, where the sound characteristics of the switch and the entire keyboard conveys a high quality and pure satisfaction in the keyboard community. Switches that are referred to as silky smooth, buttery smooth, extra smooth, or some sort of variation of smooth indicate the lack of scratchiness and this kind of perfect consistency all the way along the travel distance. Crispy is a term I use to describe high quality clicky switches where that clicky point has definition, unlike some clicky switches that are soft and almost feel like they should be tactile switches instead. And so now let's talk keycaps. This is a 1U size keycap, your standard alphabet/number square. This is a 1.25U keycap. This is a 2, and so on. The only time this is important is when we talk about the standard bottom row layout, which means the 3 keys to the left of the spacebar, the spacebar itself, and all the bottom keys to the right are standardized to a particular U-size format. So if you buy a custom keycap set, it should fit to that keyboard no problem. You should be careful with shorter right shift keys on a 65% layouts, and some brands even make smaller spacebars so that they could fit a standard 1.25U keys to the side of it. So keep that in mind. Now, keycap material is also very important today. We hear the term double shot PBT get into more gaming keyboards. So the PBT part is the durable plastic with nice coarse texture for extra grip that does not reveal finger oils. The double shot part tells you how the keycap legend is produced. So by molding 2 sets of plastics, so the writing on the keycap is its own separate plastic layer and will not fade or scratch off. Now, PBT texture and molds used to create them vary from one brand to another and are not all made to be equal. Then we have dye sublimation PBT or dye sub PBT, where the printing material is applied on top of the PBT keycap in its own shape cavity of sorts. It's still really durable and clear, but unless the keycap itself is somehow transparent or translucent, you won't have any option for a shine through keycap. ABS keycaps are next, so that's the cheap, the smooth plastic material that we all have grown up with. And despite PBT becoming more popular, ABS keycaps are still very common. So double shot ABS keycaps are about half the price to produce, so keyboard companies can do more languages, more layouts, plus you can still get all sorts of cool colorways in ABS plastic because it is cheaper. Put-in keycaps are pretty sweet. This refers to the translucent bottom half of the keycap, aka the skirt of the keycap, to help illuminate the keyboard. And I think phantom keycaps will become a bit more popular, maybe in 2022, that have this almost invisible legend until there's light shining through. And side printed keycaps offer a similar stealth look, but with clear legends facing you instead of being on top. Now, I'm sure there are plenty more keyboard terms that you'll come across in your search for the next keyboard, so share them below. And as always, keyboard warrior responsibly, my friends.